How did someone fail miserably at trying to outsmart you? My stepbrother Thorne thought he was clever. He'd spent 6 months setting up the perfect scam, one that would drain my inheritance and leave me penniless while he sailed off into early retirement. What he didn't know was that I'd been watching him the entire time. It started when Dad died and left me his half of the family business. Thorne got the other half, which seemed fair, until I realized he'd been embezzling for years. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here, a couple thousand there. Nothing that would trigger an audit. But Thorne got greedy. After Dad's funeral, he approached me with this concerned expression, like he actually cared. "The business is struggling," he said, showing me doctored financial statements. "We need to sell before we lose everything." He had a buyer lined up already, his college roommate, conveniently. They'd split my share. I'd get pennies, and I'd never know the company was actually worth millions. I played along, nodded at the right moments, asked naive questions, let him think I was the clueless little sister who'd majored in art history instead of business. I even pretended to cry when he showed me the fake debt numbers, asking what Dad would have wanted us to do. What Thorne didn't realize was that Dad had taught me to read financial statements when I was 12. I'd been secretly accessing the company's real books through Dad's old login, one Thorne had forgotten to disable. For 3 months, I documented everything, every fake invoice, every phantom expense, every dollar he'd funneled into his offshore accounts. I even tracked the properties he'd bought with stolen money, each one titled under different LLC names he thought were untraceable. Then I hired a forensic accountant, the kind that works with the FBI on fraud cases. The night before we were supposed to sign the sale papers, I invited Thorne to dinner at Dad's favorite restaurant. He showed up in a new suit, probably already picturing his beach house in the Caymans. "I have something to show you," I said, sliding a folder across the table. His face went white as he opened it. Inside were copies of everything: bank statements, wire transfers, property deeds, emails between him and his accomplice. 7 years of systematic theft, all documented in brutal detail. "Here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "You're going to sign over your half of the business to me, tonight." He tried to bluster, threatened to call the police on me for hacking, called me ungrateful, said Dad would be ashamed of what I'd become. I pulled out my phone and showed him the email draft, addressed to the FBI, the IRS, and the state attorney general. My finger hovered over the send button. "Or," I continued, "I can send this, and you can explain to a federal judge why you've been laundering money through 17 different shell companies." His hands were shaking as he signed the transfer papers. I had a notary waiting in a private room upstairs. Everything legal, everything binding. As he stood to leave, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. But here's what made him fail so miserably. He had no idea what I'd actually discovered in those files. The embezzlement was just the surface. Buried in his emails was something far worse, something involving Dad's death, something that would explain why the autopsy Dad had specifically requested in his will was never performed, why the cremation happened so quickly, why Thorne had been the one to identify the body when I was conveniently sent out of town that week. Thorne's lawyer called me yesterday. Apparently he's willing to negotiate, wants to know what it'll take for me to delete certain files. I told the lawyer I'd think about it, let Thorne sweat for a few days. But the truth was, I'd already made my decision the moment I found those emails. Let me back up. 3 weeks before Dad died, he called me into his home office. This wasn't unusual. We'd been meeting every Sunday to go over the quarterly reports together. Dad had always insisted I understand the business, even though Thorne constantly complained that I didn't need to know the details. But that particular Sunday was different. Dad closed the door, locked it. Then he pulled out a small box from his desk drawer and handed it to me. "If anything happens to me," he said, his voice steady but his eyes troubled, "I need you to open this." "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Just promise me. Don't open it unless something happens. And don't tell anyone you have it." I wanted to laugh it off, make a joke about him being dramatic, but something in his expression stopped me. Dad wasn't prone to paranoia or theatrics. He was the most level-headed person I knew. "Promise me," he repeated. I promised. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said. Found him in his office at home, slumped over his desk. Thorne had been the one to discover him, or so he claimed. By the time I got the call, I was 4 states away at an art exhibit Thorne had specifically encouraged me to attend. "Dad would want you to follow your passions," he'd said with that fake brotherly smile. I flew back immediately. But the funeral arrangements were already underway. Closed casket, cremation scheduled for the next day. When I asked about the autopsy Dad had specified in his will, Thorne showed me a document supposedly waiving it, signed by Dad just days before his death. The signature looked wrong, too shaky, too uncertain, but I was grief-stricken and exhausted, and Thorne had already taken charge of everything. Mom, Dad's second wife and Thorne's mother, was too sedated to function, and I was 24, overwhelmed, and being treated like I couldn't handle adult decisions. The night after the cremation, I remembered the box. I waited until everyone was asleep, then drove to the storage unit I'd rented across town. Inside the box were 3 things: a USB drive, a handwritten letter, and a key. The letter was dated 2 days before he died. If you're reading this, then I was right to be worried. I've discovered something about the business, about Thorne, that I can't ignore anymore. But I need proof before I can act. The USB contains encrypted files. The password is your mother's maiden name, followed by the year we started the business. The key is to a safety deposit box at First National, Box 247. I've left additional documentation there. If something happens to me before I can deal with this, you need to know. Thorne is not who you think he is, and I may have put us all in danger by confronting him. I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. Protect yourself. Trust no one. I love you, Dad. My hands shook as I opened the files. What I found changed everything. Thorne had been embezzling, yes. But that was almost quaint compared to the rest. He'd been using the company to launder money for a real estate fraud scheme. He'd been forging Dad's signature on documents for years. He'd taken out massive loans against the company's assets. Loans that would have bankrupted us within months. And then I found the emails. The first one was from Thorne to someone named Vincent, dated 3 weeks before Dad died. The old man is getting suspicious. He's been going through the books more carefully. We need to accelerate the timeline. Vincent's response. How much does he actually know? Thorne. Too much. He confronted me this morning. Said he found discrepancies. I convinced him I'd made some errors, but he's not stupid. He's going to figure it out. Vincent. We can't let that happen. You know what's at stake. Thorne. I know, but he's my father. Vincent. He's also the only thing standing between us and $20 million. Your call, but the clock is ticking. The next email was dated 5 days later. Thorne. I've made arrangements. There's a pharmacy tech who owes me a favor. He can get what we need. My stomach turned. Vincent. Are you sure about this? Once you do it, there's no going back. Thorne. I'm sure. He already has heart issues. No one will question it. I just need to make sure I'm the one who finds him, and that she's out of town when it happens. She was me. The emails continued, detailing exactly how Thorne had obtained digitalis, a heart medication that in the right dose looks exactly like a natural cardiac episode, how he'd invited Dad to work from home that day, brought him coffee laced with enough digitalis to stop his heart, how he'd waited exactly 17 minutes before calling 911, how he'd forged the autopsy waiver that same afternoon using a signature stamp he'd had made months earlier, how he'd sent me to that art exhibit specifically to have me out of state, creating an alibi while also ensuring I wouldn't be there to question anything. I sat in that storage unit until dawn, reading and rereading every email, printing copies, backing up files to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I went to the safety deposit box. Inside were more documents. Dad had been building a case against Thorne for months. Financial records showing the exact amounts stolen, communications with a lawyer about potentially removing Thorne from the company, a draft will that left everything to me, dated a week before his death but never notarized, and a recorded conversation. Dad had been wearing a wire the last time he confronted Thorne. I listened to that recording 7 times. Dad's voice, asking about the discrepancies. Thorne deflecting at first, then getting defensive, then threatening. You can't prove anything, Thorne said on the tape. I have enough to bring in the authorities, Dad replied. I'm giving you one chance to come clean, return the money, leave the company, or I go to the police tomorrow. Tomorrow? Thorne's laugh was cold. A lot can happen before tomorrow, old man. The recording ended there. Dad died that night. For weeks after that discovery, I walked around in a fog. Part of me wanted to go straight to the police. But another part, the part that had learned from Dad to think strategically, knew I needed more. The police would investigate, sure, but Thorne had covered his tracks well. The emails were from encrypted accounts. The pharmacy tech had died in a motorcycle accident 2 months after Dad's death. The digitalis would be long gone from Dad's system by now, cremation having destroyed any remaining evidence. A good defense lawyer could create reasonable doubt, paint the emails as dark humor, suggest Dad's recording was taken out of context, point out that I had motive too. I inherited everything after all. No, I needed Thorne to confess, or I needed him to make a mistake so catastrophic that no lawyer could save him. So I played the long game. I let Thorne think I was the naive little sister, let him proceed with his plan to steal my inheritance through the fake sale, let him think he'd gotten away with everything, while I quietly built my case. The forensic accountant I hired found everything, and more. Turns out Thorne had 3 other fraud schemes running simultaneously. The embezzlement was actually the smallest of his crimes. I documented every lie he told me about the company's finances, every forged document he presented, every time he pressured me to sign something without reading it carefully. I collected statements from employees he'd intimidated, found the real estate records showing properties he'd bought with laundered money, traced the shell companies back to accounts he controlled, and then I hired a private investigator. The PI was former FBI specialized in homicide cases. I showed him everything. The emails, the recording, Dad's timeline, Thorne's suspicious behavior. This is strong, he said after reviewing the files. But we need something concrete. Something that directly links him to your father's death in a way that can't be disputed. What do you suggest? He smiled. We make him confess. That's when we set up the dinner. The confrontation over the business theft. The signed transfer of ownership. But what Thorne didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that I was wearing a wire, and that the PI had 3 cameras hidden in that private dining room. The notary wasn't just a notary. She was a retired detective who'd worked with the PI for years. And when Thorne signed those papers, when he thought he was just getting caught for embezzlement, I asked him one more question. Why did you do it, Thorne? Was it really just about the money? He looked at me with such contempt. You have no idea how hard I worked to build this company, how many years I put in while you were off playing artist. And your father was going to throw it all away because of some accounting discrepancies? He was weak. He always was. Accounting discrepancies, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call stealing $7 million? I earned that money, every penny. Your father would have run this company into the ground with his outdated methods and ridiculous ethics. So you decided to kill him? The words hung in the air. Thorne went very still. What did you just say? I found the emails, Thorne. All of them. I know about Vincent. I know about the digitalis. I know you murdered my father. His face transformed. The mask of civilized businessman cracked completely. You don't know anything, he hissed. You can't prove anything. Can I? I pulled out my phone again, played the recording of Dad's last confrontation with him, watched his face go from red to white. That doesn't prove anything. He was paranoid. He was old. He was right, I interrupted. About everything. You killed him, and I can prove it. That's when Thorne lunged across the table. The PI was through the door in seconds, along with 2 police officers who'd been waiting in the hallway. But Thorne wasn't attacking me. He was trying to grab my phone, delete the files, destroy the evidence. You stupid bitch, he screamed as the officers restrained him. You don't understand what you're doing. There are people. There are others involved. You can't just— Others like Vincent? I asked calmly. Already arrested this morning. He's been very cooperative with the DA, actually. Seems he kept copies of all your communications as insurance. That's when Thorne really lost it. Started screaming about how I'd ruined everything, how Dad had deserved what happened to him, how I'd be next if I didn't stop this. The officers recorded every word. The trial took 8 months. Vincent testified in exchange for a reduced sentence. The pharmacy tech's widow came forward with texts her late husband had sent her, expressing guilt about something he'd helped Thorne with. Dad's doctor testified that the symptoms described in the autopsy report were consistent with digitalis poisoning, and the emails sealed Thorne's fate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, fraud, embezzlement, witness intimidation. Thorne got life without parole. His mother, my stepmother, tried to visit me after the sentencing. I refused. She'd known, maybe not about the murder, but about the theft, about Thorne's schemes. She'd chosen to look the other way because it benefited her too. I sold their house, donated the proceeds to a foundation in Dad's name that helps small business owners protect themselves from fraud. That was 3 years ago. Now I run the company Dad built. We're more profitable than ever. I've hired Dad's old employees back, the ones Thorne had forced out because they asked too many questions. Last month, I got a letter from Thorne, his 4th since incarceration. The first 3 I burned without reading. This time, curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, handwritten. You think you won, you think justice was served, but you have no idea what you've really done. There were others, bigger players. They protected me because I protected them, and now you've made yourself a target. Watch your back, little sister. Prison walls won't keep me from settling scores. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to the DA, added it to the evidence file, and got back to work. Because here's what Thorne never understood. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to get revenge. I was trying to do what Dad had taught me since I was 12 years old. Protect what matters, document everything, and never let the bastards grind you down. Thorne thought he was the smart one, the ruthless one, the one willing to do whatever it took. But he forgot the most important lesson Dad ever taught me. The most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. 3 days after I received Thorne's letter, his lawyer called again. My client wants to discuss certain information he has. Information about other parties involved in various business dealings. He's willing to cooperate fully with authorities in exchange for a sentence reduction. I let him finish his pitch. Then I said, "Tell Thorne I said no. I'm sorry. No deal. No reduction. He serves every day of his sentence. Ms. Whitmore, you don't understand. The people he's offering to testify against, they're dangerous. If they think you've blocked their chance at taking down my client, they might what? Come after me like Thorne threatened? Let me tell you something about your client and his supposed dangerous associates. I've already given the FBI everything I found in Thorne's files. Every name, every transaction, every connection. The reason none of them came forward to help him during the trial? They were too busy trying to cover their own tracks. Silence on the other end. And you know what I learned from the FBI agent I've been working with? Most of these so-called dangerous people are just white-collar criminals with good PR. They threaten and bluster, but they don't actually do anything that might draw more attention to themselves. So tell Thorne thanks for the heads up, but I'm not interested in his games anymore. I hung up. That night, sitting in Dad's old office, my office now, I pulled out the last item from his safety deposit box, one I hadn't shown anyone. Not the police, not the lawyers, not even the PI. It was a letter addressed to me, separate from the one that came with the USB drive. Dear sweetheart. It read, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you've made it this far, you've probably discovered what Thorne did. I wish I could have protected you from this knowledge. I wish I could have stopped him before it came to this. But more than anything, I wish I could tell you I'm proud of you, because I know you. I know you're reading this only after you've built an airtight case, only after you've thought through every angle, only after you've made sure justice will be served. You got that from me. The patience, the strategic thinking, the refusal to act until you're certain of the outcome. But you got something else from me too, compassion. And I'm worried that in pursuing justice, you might lose that. Don't. Thorne is what happens when ambition exists without empathy, when intelligence exists without conscience. Don't let destroying him destroy the best parts of yourself. You're going to be tempted to become hard, cynical, suspicious of everyone. Fight that. Stay soft where it counts. Trust carefully, but still trust. Love fully. Live completely. Beat him by being everything he could never be. Successful and good. Make me proud. Not by winning, but by staying human while you do it. All my love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in my desk drawer. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the Children's Hospital downtown. Dad had volunteered there for years, reading to kids in the cancer ward every Thursday evening. I'd like to continue my father's tradition, I wrote. When can I start? The company is thriving. The fraud schemes have been dismantled. Thorne is exactly where he belongs. But every Thursday evening, I sit in a hospital room with kids who are fighting battles that make corporate fraud look trivial. I read them stories, make them laugh, listen when they want to talk. And I think about Dad's final lesson. Winning isn't worth anything if you lose yourself in the process. Thorne tried to outsmart me by underestimating me, by thinking I was too soft, too naive, too focused on art and emotion to see what he was really doing. He was right about one thing. I am soft. I am emotional. I do care deeply about things beyond profit margins and power plays. But that's not weakness. That's what made me patient enough to build the perfect case. What made me careful enough to protect every piece of evidence. What made me strong enough to face him down and send him to prison for the rest of his life. And it's what keeps me human on the other side of that victory. Last week, I received an email from the PI who helped me catch Thorne. He's working a new case. Another family business torn apart by fraud and betrayal. The daughter suspects her uncle but can't prove anything. She reminds me of you, he wrote. Could you talk to her? Give her some guidance? I met her at a coffee shop downtown. She was 23, exhausted, and drowning in financial documents she didn't fully understand. Her uncle had convinced her dying father to sign over control of his pharmaceutical company. Now she was being pushed out entirely. I recognized that look in her eyes. Grief mixed with determination. Fear mixed with fury. I pulled out a notebook. First, I said, stop showing him that you suspect anything. Play along. Be the grieving daughter who's too overwhelmed to think straight. Let him believe he's winning. She nodded, taking notes. Second, get copies of everything. Bank statements, emails, contracts, anything he's touched. Don't be obvious about it. Use your father's old access codes if you can. Set up a separate email account that can't be traced to you. I spent 3 hours with her, sharing every tactic I'd used, every mistake I'd avoided, every resource I'd discovered. As she was leaving, she turned back. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. I thought about Dad's letter, about staying human, about being successful and good. Because someone should have helped me, and because people like your uncle only win when we stay silent. 2 months later, she sent me a photo, her uncle in handcuffs, being led out of his office by federal agents. We did it, her message read. Just like you said, he thought I was too young and too emotional to fight back. Turns out that was his biggest mistake. I smiled and forwarded the photo to Dad's email address, one I kept active and checked regularly, just to feel close to him. Sometimes I write him messages there, updates on the company, thoughts about cases I'm helping with, questions I wish I could ask him. Today I wrote, I hope I'm making you proud, not just because we won, but because I'm trying to win the right way, to help others without becoming like Thorne, to be strategic without being cruel, to be strong without being hard. I miss you every day. But I feel you in the work I do, in the choices I make, in the person I'm becoming. Thank you for teaching me that the smartest move isn't always the most ruthless one, that the best revenge is building something better than what they tried to destroy. I love you. I'll keep making you proud. I hit send, knowing the message would bounce back undelivered, but saying it still mattered. Thorne is serving life in a maximum security facility. His lawyer has stopped calling. His mother has stopped trying to contact me. Vincent is serving 15 years and has become a cautionary tale in business schools about the dangers of fraud. The company Dad built now has 3 times the revenue and employs twice as many people. And me? I sleep well at night. Not because I destroyed Thorne, but because I did it without becoming him. That's how you really win. That's how someone fails miserably at trying to outsmart you, by never understanding that the most powerful thing you can do is stay human while you take them down. But the story doesn't end there. It never really does. 6 months after helping that first woman take down her uncle, I started getting more calls, more emails, more desperate daughters and sons who'd watched family members steal their inheritances, manipulate their dying parents, forge documents. At first, I helped them individually, coffee shop meetings, late-night phone calls, walking them through bank statements, referrals to the PI and forensic accountant I'd used. Then I realized I was treating symptoms instead of the disease. I was sitting in my office one Tuesday when my assistant brought in a stack of letters. 17 people asking for help, 17 families being torn apart by fraud, 17 stories that sounded disturbingly like mine. I called the PI. We need to do something bigger, I said. Something systemic. 3 months later, we launched the Whitmore Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families identify and prosecute financial fraud. We partnered with law schools to provide pro bono legal services, with accounting firms to offer forensic analysis at reduced rates, with therapists who specialized in family trauma. We created a database of red flags, warning signs that someone might be embezzling from a family business, patterns in behavior that often preceded financial abuse, and we trained people to document everything. The first year, we helped 43 families. The second year, 112. By year 3, we'd recovered over $60 million in stolen assets and put 27 people in prison. But what I didn't anticipate was the backlash. The threatening letters started arriving about 18 months after we launched. Anonymous at first. Vague warnings about minding my own business. Then they got more specific, more personal. Someone left a dead rat on my doorstep with a note. Stop digging or you'll be buried next. My car was keyed. My office broken into, though nothing was stolen. Just files scattered everywhere as a message. The police couldn't do much. No evidence, no witnesses, no way to trace the threats back to anyone specific. But I knew who was behind it. Not Thorne. He was locked up tight. But the network of people he'd worked with, the ones who'd relied on his laundering operation, the ones who were now watching their own schemes unravel as we helped families fight back. I hired security, installed cameras, varied my routes to work, and kept going. Because here's what those threats revealed. We were making a difference. We were disrupting a system that had operated unchecked for decades. We were teaching people to fight back, and that terrified the people who profited from silence. Then came the lawsuit. A man named Bernard Castellano, one of the people we'd helped put in prison for defrauding his sister out of her inheritance, sued me personally, claimed I'd violated his privacy, that I'd encouraged his sister to hack into his computer, that I'd orchestrated a conspiracy to frame him. It was nonsense. Complete fabrication, but it was expensive nonsense. His lawyer was good. One of those attack dogs who specializes in burying opponents in paperwork. Within 3 months, I'd spent $80,000 on legal fees just responding to motions. My own lawyer pulled me aside. "He's not trying to win," she explained. "He's trying to bankrupt you, make it so expensive to defend yourself that you shut down the initiative." "So what do we do?" She smiled. "We countersue for malicious prosecution, and we make it public." I'd been trying to keep my head down, stay focused on the work, not draw attention to myself beyond what was necessary. But my lawyer was right. Silence was exactly what they wanted. So I gave an interview to a business magazine. Told them the whole story, Dad's murder, Thorne's conviction, the threats I'd received, Castellano's frivolous lawsuit. The article went viral. Suddenly I was getting calls from other magazines, podcasts, news programs. Everyone wanted to hear about the woman taking on corporate fraud and family betrayal. I said yes to everything. I talked about Dad's letter, about staying human while fighting monsters, about the hundreds of families we'd helped, and I talked about the people trying to silence us. Within a week, 3 law firms reached out offering to defend me pro bono. Castellano's lawyer suddenly wanted to settle. The threat stopped, because the one thing predators hate more than anything is sunlight. But that publicity came with its own complications. My stepmother reached out, first through her lawyer, then directly. "I saw your interview," her voicemail said. "I had no idea it was that bad. No idea what Thorne had done. Please, can we talk? I'm your family too." I deleted the message. 2 days later, she showed up at my office. My assistant tried to stop her, but she pushed past, looking older and smaller than I remembered. 3 years had not been kind to her. 5 minutes, she said. "That's all I'm asking." I considered calling security, having her removed, but something in her face made me pause. 3 minutes, I said, "and only because I'm curious what you could possibly say that would matter." She sat across from my desk, hands twisted in her lap. "I didn't know," she started. "About your father, about the murder, I swear I didn't know. But you knew about the embezzlement." She flinched. "I suspected, but Thorne said, he said your father approved everything, that it was complex business arrangements I wouldn't understand. You chose not to understand. There's a difference." "You're right." Her voice broke. "I chose Thorne over the truth. I chose my son over justice. And I've lost everything because of it." I waited. My friends won't speak to me. The wives in our social circle, they've frozen me out. They think I knew about the murder, that I helped cover it up. My sister won't return my calls. And Thorne, she stopped, tears streaming down her face. "Thorne blames me, says if I'd been smarter, if I'd done more to control you, none of this would have happened. So you came here for what? Sympathy? Forgiveness?" "No." She looked up at me with red eyes. "I came to tell you that you were right. About everything, and to tell you I'm sorry, not because I expect you to forgive me, but because you deserve to hear it." We sat in silence. I thought about Dad's letter, about staying human, about not becoming hard and cynical. I thought about how easy it would be to kick her out, to tell her that sorry means nothing. But I also thought about what Dad would have wanted, not for her sake, but for mine. "I appreciate the apology," I finally said, "but we're not family. We stopped being family the moment you chose to look the other way while your son stole from us, while he killed my father." She nodded, accepting this. "However," I continued, "if you want to actually make amends, there's something you can do." She looked up hopefully. "Tell me everything. Every conversation with Thorne about the business. Every suspicion you had. Every time you chose not to ask questions. I want names, dates, details. Because I guarantee there are things you know that could help other cases we're working on." Her face went pale. "You want me to testify? Against my own son? Your son is already in prison for life. This isn't about him anymore. This is about the network he was part of. The people who taught him these schemes. The ones who are still out there doing the same thing to other families. I don't know if I can..." "Then we're done here." I stood up. "You want absolution? You want to prove you're sorry? That's the price. Otherwise, your apology is just words." She left without answering. I didn't expect to hear from her again, but 3 days later, she called my lawyer. She was ready to talk. Over the next 6 weeks, my stepmother provided testimony in 4 separate cases, revealed details about meetings she'd overheard, introduced us to other wives who'd suspected their husbands were involved in similar schemes, but had been too afraid to speak up. Her cooperation led to 3 more arrests, recovered $8 million in stolen assets, helped a woman prove her husband had forged her signature on documents transferring their business to his mistress. I never spoke to her again after that first meeting, but I did send her a letter after the final case closed. What you did doesn't erase what you didn't do, but it's a start. I hope you find whatever peace is possible after everything that's happened. Autumn. I signed my name. Not daughter, not family, just my name. Because some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. But you can still acknowledge the attempt. The initiative is now in its 4th year. We've expanded to 6 states, hired 12 full-time staff members, partnered with 50 law firms, and we've helped over 400 families fight back against fraud. But the work takes its toll. Last month, I was working on a particularly brutal case. A woman whose brother had drained their mother's savings while she had Alzheimer's. He'd convinced her to sign over power of attorney, then systematically emptied every account. When the mother died, there was nothing left for her care facility bill. The facility sued the daughter, claiming she was responsible for her mother's debt. We proved the brother had stolen everything, got him arrested, recovered most of the money. The daughter was so grateful she sent me flowers every week for a month. But after that case closed, I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. My therapist, Yeah, I finally got one. Says it's compassion fatigue, that I'm absorbing everyone's trauma without processing my own. When did you last take a day off? She asked during our session. I couldn't remember. When did you last do something just for joy? Not for justice. Not to help someone. Just because it made you happy? I stared at her. That's what I thought, she said. You're so busy being strong for everyone else that you've forgotten how to be gentle with yourself. She was right. I'd spent 3 years running, building the initiative, helping families, fighting the good fight, but I hadn't stopped moving long enough to actually process what Thorn had taken from me. Not just Dad, not just my inheritance, but my ability to trust, my sense of safety, my belief that family meant something. So I did something I hadn't done since before Dad died. I took a week off, drove to a cabin in the mountains with no Wi-Fi, brought Dad's favorite books and a journal, and I let myself fall apart. I cried for the Sunday mornings reviewing quarterly reports together, for the way Dad would call me at midnight when he couldn't sleep and wanted to talk about business strategy, for the future we'd planned, working together, building something meaningful. I cried for the sister relationship I'd thought I had with Thorn before discovering what he really was, for the stepmother who chose wrong, for the family that could have been, and I cried for the version of myself who died the night I opened that box, the one who still believed people were fundamentally good, who didn't read manipulation into every conversation, who could take words at face value instead of analyzing them for hidden threats. By the end of that week, I'd filled 3 journals and gone through 2 boxes of tissues, but I also felt lighter, like I'd been carrying Dad's murder around as weight, and finally set it down. The grief was still there, the anger too, but they weren't crushing me anymore. When I got back to the city, I made some changes. I hired 2 more staff members so I could actually take weekends off, set boundaries around evening calls, started going to yoga classes on Tuesday mornings before work, and I joined a pottery class. Dad used to say I had good hands, that I could build things, fix things, make things. Turned out he was right. There's something meditative about working with clay, shaping something from nothing, watching it transform under your fingers, accepting that sometimes it collapses and you have to start over. It's not about the final product, it's about the process. The practice of creating something just because. My instructor, an older woman named Delilah who wears exclusively purple and has clay permanently under her fingernails, doesn't know anything about my history. She just knows I'm terrible at centering clay and have a tendency to work too aggressively. Ease up, she tells me every week. You're strangling it. The clay responds to gentle pressure, not force. I suspect she's not just talking about pottery. 3 months into the class, I made something that didn't collapse. A small bowl, slightly lopsided, with my fingerprints visible in the glaze. It's objectively not very good, but I love it. I keep it on my desk at work, put paper clips in it. Let it remind me that not everything has to be perfect to have value. That imperfection is human, that staying soft is its own kind of strength. Yesterday, a man showed up at the initiative's office. Late 30s, nice suit, nervous energy. I need help, he said. My father passed away 6 months ago. My sister has power of attorney. She's selling everything. The house, the business, the investment accounts. Says Dad had debts we didn't know about. But the numbers don't add up. I recognized the story immediately. Seen variations of it dozens of times. Sit down, I said. Tell me everything from the beginning. As he talked, I took notes, asked questions, saw the pattern emerging. His sister had been positioning herself for years, getting Dad to sign documents when he was medicated, isolating him from other family members, creating a paper trail that made her look like the responsible caretaker, while painting her brother as the distant son who didn't care. Classic financial abuse, and hard to prove without documentation. Do you have access to any of your father's financial records? I asked. He shook his head. My sister has everything. She says it's too complicated for me to understand. That's what they always say. I pulled out my notebook, started walking him through the same process I'd been taught, the same one I now teach others. Document everything. Get copies however you can. Create a timeline. Find the inconsistencies. Be patient. Be thorough. Be strategic. As he left, he turned back in the doorway. Why do you do this? Help people like me? I thought about Dad, about the letter he left, about the choice to stay human while fighting monsters. Because someone has to, I said. And because I know what it's like to have your family stolen from you. Not just the money, but the trust, the safety, the belief that the people who are supposed to love you actually will. He nodded slowly. Thank you. After he left, I pulled out my phone, opened Dad's email address. Another one today, I wrote. Another family being torn apart by greed, but also another person who's going to fight back. Another person who won't stay silent. You'd be proud of what we've built here, Dad. Not just the initiative, but the community. The network of people refusing to let the predators win. I miss you. Still. Always. But I'm doing okay. I'm staying human. Just like you asked. Love you. I hit send. Watched it bounce back. Then I closed my laptop and headed to pottery class. Because that's the thing about healing. It's not linear. It's not dramatic. It's just showing up day after day. Doing the work. Building something new from the broken pieces. Thorn tried to destroy me. Tried to take everything Dad built and burn it down. He failed. Not because I was smarter. Not because I was more ruthless. But because I refused to become him. I chose to build instead of just burn. To help instead of just hurt. To stay soft where it counts while developing armor where it's needed. That's how you really beat someone who tries to outsmart you. You don't just take them down. You rise up. You become better than they ever could be. You prove that strength and compassion aren't opposites. They're partners. And you keep going.